Hi folks, maybe you want to know a bit more about ASCOM, maybe you need some help in setting it up, or maybe, just maybe, you want to get rid of this thing. I'm Dr. Ray and welcome to AstroGadge. So, what is ASCOM? Well, ASCOM stands for Astronomy Common Object Model. It was developed in the 1990s specifically for astrophotography use, and it allows different astrophotography equipment and applications to be controlled through use of a common language. Now at the moment it requires a Windows-based operating system. However, there's a new version of it being developed called Alpaca, which allows it to be used in non-Windows operating systems. Why is ASCOM useful to astrophotographers? Well, to understand this, it's useful to think of it using a certain analogy.
Okay, so it goes something like this. Imagine there's a service provider of some sort, and they've been awarded a contract to build houses or whatever, it doesn't really matter. And they decide to employ some workers to carry out these tasks. In this case, they decide to employ 3 workers. They also decide to employ a foreman or a project manager, whatever you want to call them, to oversee the work and to communicate back to them regarding progress on the tasks. Foreman, however, quickly realizes there's a problem. One of the workers is German, one of them's Spanish, and one of them's French. And just to complicate matters, the German doesn't speak Spanish or French, the Spaniard doesn't speak German or French, and the French guy doesn't speak German or Spanish. And just when it couldn't get even worse, turns out the foreman or project manager only speaks English. So, nothing's happening. No communication, no progress, no reports back. Can you see where this is going? Fortunately, the foreman has a bright idea. What he decides to do is employ some language-specific interpreters who relay his instructions to the workers, who in turn can relay their progress and keep everyone updated as to what's happening in terms of tasks completed, etc., which allows the foreman to report back to the service provider. So we now have a situation where there's a line of communication between the service provider to the workers and back. So transferring this analogy to ASCOM architecture, we can see directly exactly the same situation. So we have our astrophotography application and we have a number of devices which are connected to the computer. Now, as we said, all of these devices, whether it's a camera or a mount or a focuser, might be made from different manufacturers. They're different devices. So from manufacturer to manufacturer or from device to device, they may well have different methods of communication. And this is where ASCOM comes in. ASCOM provides an environment which, as we said earlier, gives a common language. Now on its own, it cannot communicate these devices because, as we said, they speak in different languages. So what we have to do is download ASCOM drivers which are device or manufacturer specific to the particular peripherals that we have connected. and allow camera speak to convert to this common language of ASCOM, which in turn conversation with the astrophotography application. And just as importantly, it allows different devices, and sometimes from different manufacturers, to communicate with each other and then communicate with the astrophotography application. Now that's particularly important when we come on to plate solving, where the camera has to communicate with the mount and the application. And we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, so here we are. We're at the ASCOM download page. There's the URL up here. I'll post that at the end of the video so you've got a reference to that easily. Now on this page, well, first and foremost, there's the download button there, but you'll notice that there's lots of other things to be had here, including drivers for various things. There's drivers for your telescope mount, cameras, domes, etc., etc. A whole range of devices that are ASCOM compliant. And again, if you go into this, for example, the cameras and videos, there's a whole list of ASCOM compliant devices here, which you can check to see that your particular setup is compatible with. So, as I say, yeah, lots of resources here, and this is fairly self-explanatory. When you start to download ASCOM, what you will find, it might actually ask you if you have or do you want to download Microsoft.NET framework. The answer is yes, you do. It's alright, it won't do any harm to your computer. It's basically a piece of software which ASCOM relies on to operate. So the download may ask you to actually download this additionally, or it may do it itself. I think it depends on the download site you go to. But if you do have to do that, fear not, it's a legitimate piece of software, and it's just required by ASCOM to perform its various functions. So the important thing to say again is that ASCOM itself is a common language. In itself, if it's installed in your computer, it won't do anything. It relies on the drivers of your various devices to communicate with. So before we do that, you have to download the ASCOM framework, which is what this is. So don't get confused between ASCOM and the ASCOM drivers, which are over here. They're two totally functionally different things, which obviously we've tried to explain in the analogy that we used previously. Okay, so once you've downloaded the ASCOM framework, what you want to do is find out for a start if your device, whether it's a camera, whether it's a filter wheel, or a mount or whatever, is ASCOM compliant. In other words, it will work with ASCOM. And to do that, either phone up the vendor where you bought the item from, or go on the website of the manufacturer of your particular device. Now, there are various manufacturers, and I've got a list of 3 here. Obviously there are a lot more, but just for brevity's sake, then we'll look here, for example, at a company called Attic, which make cameras and other astrophotography equipment, and you can see here that they supply ASCOM drivers for their devices that enables the cameras and other devices to communicate. And all this is including what they call their core software. So basically, you download this software pack, and your ASCOM drivers for pretty much all Attic devices are contained within that. So that takes care of that. And likewise, a company called QHY, again, they do the same thing. They've got a pack of drivers which includes ASCOM drivers for the different devices. So again, and they've got a list of cameras and so on and so forth, which this software relates to. And also ZWO, which is again a Chinese manufacturer of cameras and other astrophotography hardware. And again, you'll see here that they have ASCOM drivers for different things. You'll note also that they've got a direct download to the ASCOM platform, so if you have a ZWO device, you can download both from the same site. You can download the driver and the ASCOM platform from this one website. So pretty straightforward. In terms of mounts, there are different obviously different manufacturers of telescope mount, many of which are ASCOM compliant, and again you can find that out from your particular vendor or the manufacturer's website. I'm going to talk about EQ Mod, which is a driver for, well, it's not specifically, but it was developed for Skywatcher Sinter style mounts. Since this, I own Skywatcher mounts. This is a driver I used to communicate with ASCOM and third-party astrophotography software. So again, if you're like me and you have a Skywatcher or an Orion mount, basically the same thing, then you'll need to download this particular driver in order for your software to communicate with your telescope mount. And this is what we're actually going to go through. I'm going to talk you through, because people do get a bit confused by it, and it does look a bit daunting, but it's actually very, very simple. And once this software is installed on your computer, then it can be used by any third-party astrophotography software that utilizes or speaks to ASCOM. So you only have to really do it once on the one machine, and you're good to go. And as I say, it does look a little daunting, but once it's up and running, it's actually pretty straightforward. If you we'll talk about the functionality, the various things it does, but essentially it will allow you to get rid of your handset. You won't need the handset controller of your mount anymore. Everything can be done through ASCOM. There's an ASCOM driver, and it allows a whole range of wonderful functionality that simply isn't present on your handset, so it's well worth doing. And one of the developers, this guy here, Chris Shillito, has written and uploaded a whole load of tutorials on the various functions of EQ Mod. Very, very powerful piece driver which allows you to do things such as guiding, plate solving, a whole range of things that you simply can't do in your handset easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download this particular piece of software, and I'm going to show you how it's configured and how you connect it to your mount, and sort of functionality that it allows you to achieve without using your handset.
Before downloading your mount driver, you need to decide what physical connection you actually need to connect your mount to your laptop. There are basically two methods of doing this. The first one is connecting your laptop to the handset, which in turn connects to the mount. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that, and the reason for this is that particular method actually subverts EQ ASCOM, and you will not get the full functionality of the driver by that method. The best method, and the one I recommend, is to connect your mount directly from the computer. And you will need a cable that is termed an EQ diode. And it's designed to give, as it says, a direct connection between your computer laptop to the mount via EQ ASCOM. and so you can therefore enjoy all the benefits that gives you. So as I said earlier, this tutorial concerns itself with Skywatcher center type mounts. Now, depending on how old your mount is and what model it is, will dictate what kind of EQ diode cable you need. Now, in the older models such as HEQ6 Pro and 5, what you'll find is that, like the handset that's supplied with these mounts, you'll need a D-sub type serial connector at one end and a USB connection at the other. What you'll find in the EQ diode cables is that there's a chipset embedded in the USB plug that does all the conversions for you in there. In the older, in the more recent models such as the EQ6R and the EQ8R and EQ8RH, what you'll find is that the D-sub serial connection has actually been replaced with the J45 connection. At the other end, what you'll find is again, just as in the previous cable I described, it's a USB connection with a chipset inside to do the conversion. Now, a little bit of advice here is go for the best quality lead you can. Don't go for these cheap conversion connections because personally I found through experiences that they don't work, they're not reliable, and you get all sorts of problems with them. So I would recommend going for the best quality lead you can, and in particular going for what's called this FTDI chipset that does a conversion in the cable. Now, the advantage of this particular format is regardless of where you plug the lead into your computer, it will always connect through the same COM port without changing when you unplug it. And believe me, that is so useful rather than having to go into the device manager every time and figure out which COM port your mount's connected to. You know, if you're in any doubt at all about what cable you need that works reliably, then speak to the vendor where you got your mount, or indeed just go onto the website of the manufacturer of the mount you have, and you should be able to figure out what is appropriate for your particular model of mount.
Okay, so once you've downloaded ASCOM, the first thing you'll notice on your desktop are these two shortcuts. Likewise, you'll see under your app list ASCOM Platform 6 being displayed, along with various other pieces of software which come part of the package. These are generally tools for diagnostic purposes or for simulators in ASCOM. You don't really need to worry about them at this point in time. They're there if you need them later on to set up or modify various functions that ASCOM has. But like I said, this particular moment in time we can effectively ignore them. Likewise, once you've downloaded the EQMod ASCOM driver for your telescope mount, you'll see in your application list a little folder here with various utilities in it. There's one here, for example, helps you set up control via gamepad. I'll show you this working later. And essentially what we're interested in first is actually the setup window for the driver. So simply click on that, and what you should find is that the driver setup page will appear. Now, there are various defaults that may come up with it, and it's best to leave them alone, particularly things like ASCOM pulse guiding, if that's what the route you want to go down. It comes with a default latitude and longitude. You need to program in exactly what your particular location is. ASCOM needs that to work properly. So that's a definite must to fill in. The next things to consider are timeout. Now, I use 2000, it seems to work fine. I've had no issues with it. I have a Skywatcher NEQ6 Pro, an old one, and I've got the EQ8R one of the newer ones, and it seems to work fine on that setting. I haven't had any issues. Likewise with the retry of 2. Now, this is where certain sources of reference seem to differ, is the baud rate you should use. I use 9600. Some of the software said you should be using a higher baud rate of 128 or 115. I've tried that, and for me at least, I don't know why, it doesn't seem to work. 9600 is the setting I use, and I've had no issues with it. It's very stable, very reliable. So I would recommend that you start with 9600. If it works, I would leave it, or if you want to try the higher baud rate, maybe you can get it to work. I don't know. But I find, certainly with the 2 mounts I have, that these settings are absolutely fine, no issues at all, and everything works spot on. The next thing you need to set up is which port you're going to connect you have your mount connected to. Obviously, I'm putting the cart before the horse slightly here, because you would normally, when you do your setup, you'd have your mount already connected. I'll talk about that in a second. Now, ASCOM can find the port automatically. Okay, that's one thing that's done. It's in this case it can't find it. If it can't find the port, then you can simply define it yourself. No problem with that. So at this stage, that's all we need to do. Connect the mount to the computer and make sure that the communication port is set up properly, and we'll go through that in a second. Once that's done, we can shut the setup down.
So here is the HEQ6 Skywatcher mount. It's over 10 years old, so consequently it has the old style cable I showed you earlier, which is plugged into the laptop. Clearly you would want to do that before you began your driver setup, but so I've kind of put the horse before the cart in some respects, but never mind. The observant amongst you will realise that I've modded this mount. I've modified the power input, because I absolutely hate this horrible little socket thing that the mount comes with. It's very unstable, bad connection after a while, and just generally comes out far too easily, and it's just a pain in the neck. So consequently I modified it, as you can see. Once everything's connected, we're ready to go. So we've connected the mount to the laptop, and we're ready now to connect the software to the mount. In this case it's SG Pro. So to do that in this particular program, we simply press this toggle here, and immediately we have this error coming up. Now, this is actually a common error. It's nothing to fret over, really. It's amazing the amount of people that get this far and then get put off because this pops up, and they kind of give up because they can't figure out what the problem is. The problem is actually very simple. It's when we set up the driver, it set up believing that the mount was located on the COM port 5. I think that was right. And that error was simply telling us, if I bring it up again, that error was simply telling us that it couldn't find that mount on that particular computer port. So what we can do to rectify that is we can simply type in Device Manager at the Start menu, and then fire it up and look under comms and ports. In this case we can see the mount's actually connected to the USB COM3 port, not COM5 as I think it was. Now just to double check in that, yes, we can see that it's the FTDI format of serial USB serial converter. So all we have to simply do, it's a really easy fix, we minimize this, go back to our setup.
Rate 1.
And at the bottom left here, we'll see yes, it's on COM5, which is clearly wrong. So we'll simply move that to COM3, OK it, and now with a bit of luck everything should fire up quite nicely, all being well. Yes, success. So we have clearly a connection here. Device is not parked, I can park it.
Parked.
I can unpark it.
Unparked.
We can see that there's a number of different tracking rates. There's sidereal, lunar, solar and cometary. In this case we'll put it on to sidereal.
Sidereal.
And everything so far seems to be communicating, working nicely. You'll see that these numbers here look quite daunting and intimidating. There's no reason for that to be the case. It's actually quite simple. This LST stands for local sidereal time, and that simply allows us to figure out when a particular astronomical object crosses a meridian. Very useful if you want to set the software up to do an automatic meridian flip. These figures here, once the mount's properly aligned, be it by plate solving or through alignment stars, will tell you the exact celestial coordinates where the telescope or the mount is pointing, and the same information here in azimuth and altazimuth. So nothing to be particularly concerned about here. The other thing that we can do, as you probably heard in the background there, is we can set we can set up various features here. One of which is to provide audio confirmations of various commands that are sent to the mount from the computer, including the slew rates. 1 being the slowest slew rate, 4 being the fastest, although you can set up as many speeds as you want. I think it's up to 10 here. Various other commands that you can get the laptop to beep once it's issued and confirmed. So again, that's one thing you can set up. You can also, which is very useful, and we'll talk about this in another video, is you can set up what's called ASCOM pulse guide settings, so that this enables ASCOM to actually control your guiding, so you can do away with the ST4 cable and port because it's no longer needed. All the guiding is done straight through ASCOM. So as I say, one less cable you need, one less cable to trip over, and there are many advantages over using ASCOM to guide rather than ST4, and as I said, we'll talk about that in a future video. The other thing that you can do, and again I won't show you it working in this particular video, but again in future ones we'll go over this, is you can set up a basic game controller, video game controller, to access the functions of the mount, for movement functions of the mount remotely. So you can use the toggle, for example, to move it north, east, west, so on and so forth, or increase or decrease the slew rate. So effectively your gamepad becomes a wireless remote control. Well, in my case it's wireless. I use a Wi-Fi dongle to connect rather than a lead. So lots and lots of very useful features that this once this is connected that simply don't exist when you use the supplied handset. So again, to minimize this, simply press this spanner icon here, and all is ready, as they say. Alright, so everything is connected, everything seems to be working, so let's check out the virtual slew controls on the driver here to make sure everything is indeed working as we expect. So let's try declination first. First of all, I'll increase the slew rate to number 4, which is the fastest setting, so we can actually see things happen.
Wait for.
And as you can hear, the software confirmed that that's been executed. So let's try the declination again. Yeah, so that seems to be moving nicely. Again, opposite way. Yes. And in the RA axis. Yes. Good. So everything seems to be working properly. Isn't that great? Everything works if you let it. Fantastic. Okay, and just to demonstrate, as if any demonstration was needed, that these drivers and ASCOM are truly cross-platform compatible, I've fired up APT, Astrophotography Tools, which is another third-party astrophotography acquisition and control software package. As I say, the beauty of using these drivers is once they're set up in your computer, then that's it. No matter what software you fire up, provided it's ASCOM compliant, it will connect automatically. So as I said earlier, I use SG Pro. I'm just used to using that. APT, very powerful piece of software. I'm not as familiar with it, but just to demonstrate that again, that everything should work once everything's downloaded on your computer.
Wait 1.
I've actually just pressed this button, connect slot, and you've heard that the drivers acknowledged that command, and in fact here it comes. It's fired up quite nicely, and again we change the preset.
Wait for.
Everything's communicating nicely. So again, just to demonstrate that ASCOM and ASCOM drivers are compatible across different software platforms. Well folks, that's the end of this video. I hope it's been useful. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, don't forget to give me the thumbs up. If you didn't, give me the thumbs down. Let me know why. If it's something I've not said, if there's something not explained well, or if I'm wrong, let me know. I'm learning here too. Meantime, again, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Watch the sky everywhere. Keep looking. Keep watching the sky.